Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of VOW Live. Rob McCarron here. We are live on the Voices of Wrestling YouTube, voicesofwrestling.com/YouTube, and we won't waste too much time. Lanza of Voices of Wrestling. Joe, I had a bunch of topics to get to today when I was planning out doing the show. A week, by the way, I wasn't even planning on doing the show. I only decided this today. So after going through about 8 different topics, guess what happened? Daniel Bryan announced his retirement, and now that is topic number 1 of 1. Joe, how are you tonight, and what are your thoughts on the retirement of Daniel Bryan?
Wait, so you mean we're not going to be breaking down Yuji Hino's Wrestle 1 title run here? That's not what we're going to be doing here tonight?
That was topic number 7 on the list, but no, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to throw it all out.
You've thrown me a curveball, Robert.
Yep, I'm sorry. That's what happens in wrestling on a Monday, right?
On a live show.
Yeah. It just goes nuts. But Daniel Bryan is gone, and it's been an interesting day on Twitter, but the world wants to know what Joe Lanza thinks.
Oh, really? I mean, I guess I think what everybody else thinks. That was one hell of a speech. I don't even know how to react to that. That was a very convincing speech, and I'm almost convinced he's actually retired now.
Yeah. You're almost convinced?
Almost convinced.
Almost convinced. So there's been a lot of talk. I mean, obviously, Daniel Bryan on Twitter announced his retirement. He went through the whole speech on Raw tonight, and that's the question. The question is this a retirement from WWE until he can go elsewhere? Is he going to wrestle somewhere outside of WWE at some point? That is the big question. And you still think there's a chance that is indeed going to happen?
Yes. I'm a little less convinced than I was before that speech. He's a hell of a worker, but I think that I still smell a rat here.
Okay.
I think that whether he's pulling a move or they're pulling a move in conjunction with each other, meaning him and the company, I am not convinced that this man is not going to wrestle again. Okay. I'll phrase it to you this way.
Sure.
If someone handed me $1 million and said, Joe, you can take this $1 million, but if Daniel Bryan wrestles another wrestling match at some point, you have to swallow this death pill and die instantly. I would not take the money. I'm not 100% convinced that this guy is not going to wrestle again.
Well, let's go right now. If that was indeed his last time in a WWE ring in a significant role, if his last match was indeed April of last year, thinking that was it for Daniel Bryan, obviously not the best end for the in-ring career of Daniel Bryan after the highs that he reached. But it's certainly, and we got a lot of Daniel Bryan. We got a lot of memories of Daniel Bryan. If that was it from Daniel Bryan and he never goes to the independent scene again, it's a proud career, no? I mean, this is a career that most likely is going to go into multiple Hall of Fames soon.
Well, he should have been in the Observer Hall of Fame last year, and I still don't understand the mindset of the people who didn't vote for him. It makes absolutely no sense. If you're talking about one of the greatest workers in the history of wrestling, without question. If you don't vote for him, I mean, who the hell are you voting for? He's, sure, as much of a slam dunk as anybody. So that's just baffling to me. And I'll go as far to say it's shameful that if you had a Hall of Fame vote, you didn't vote for this guy. It's shameful. And I think he's an absolute lock for the WWE Hall of Fame. There's no question about that. I mean, there's no question. Well, I'll tell you what, if he comes back, they better put him in fast, because if he comes back and wrestles a match somewhere, they might be very angry at him and they may not put him in their Hall of Fame. But he'll get in the Observer Hall of Fame probably next year. But he should have been in this year for sure.
Yeah, it should have been. I mean, it was a complete shock because I thought he was maybe the only one who was a mortal lock. I thought Brock Lesnar was going to be a lock, but I thought he was a lock for sure. And it ended up being he was the on the fence guy, where Shinsuke Nakamura was the lock. It was a crazy season. But yeah, I could see him going in the WWE Hall of Fame probably in 2017, most likely. It looks like this year's pretty much set for a headliner. But one of those years when they're low on headliners, Daniel Bryan certainly looks like a good fit. Do you have a favorite memory of Daniel Bryan?
2006, the entire year. That's when I was going to any Ring of Honor show that was in reasonable driving distance.
Mm-hmm.
And that also coincides with what I believe was his best bell-to-bell year, 2006. In fact, I think Bryan Danielson's 2006 is one of the great in-ring years in the history of wrestling. Out of anybody. You talk about 1989 Ric Flair, or pick any year you want, any great year of any great wrestler, and his 2006 is right there with anybody.
Yeah, it's. I remember being a fan. I mean, Daniel Bryan wasn't what got me into Ring of Honor by any means. But he's what kept me into Ring of Honor when I started to fade out of it a bit. And when he left Ring of Honor, I was basically done as a full-time follower of Ring of Honor. It was Daniel Bryan who, when he got fired for the 3-month period from WWE for choking out Justin Roberts, he had a match in Shakara in Taylor, Michigan. And to this day, the only Shakara show I've ever gone to was a headline show of Daniel Bryan, Bryan Danielson, versus Eddie Kingston. I wanted to see Daniel Bryan wrestle on the indie scene, and I went and saw him in Shakara. To this day, the only show that Mike Quackenbush has been able to get me to go to as a paying customer.
I think he was in King of Trios that year too.
He might have been. He might have been. He was doing some things during his brief time off. From WWE.
2009 King of Trios for sure, because I was actually at the 2009 King. That was the last Chikara show that I went to, and he was definitely on that show. I think it was can't remember his team, but he for sure worked trios that year too.
Daniel Bryan bringing people to Shakara, but maybe never again. I loved, the ROH run is legendary as far as the indie scene goes. I mean, he and Samoa Joe were basically the propellers of Ring of Honor, a little bit CM Punk. It's an interesting thing too, because ROH really was built on Daniel Bryan and Samoa Joe. And, CM Punk was there in a lot of meaningful stuff, but I look at him as on the Mount Rushmore of ROH, but I don't necessarily see CM Punk as big for Ring of Honor as Samoa Joe and Daniel Bryan were. If you were putting a top 3 in Ring of Honor history together for the 2000s, would Daniel Bryan be 1 or 2 for you?
Absolutely. It'd be number 1.
Number 1.
And I'd have Joe number 2. I mean, you can go 1A, 1B, but those would be the top 2 for sure. I agree with that.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. If anyone out there is listening, I want to thank everyone for listening and watching on the Voices of Wrestling YouTube. We are live tonight talking Daniel Bryan's retirement with Joe Lanza of the Voices of Wrestling podcast. Follow him on Twitter at Joe M. Lanza. If you want to hear his wrestling thoughts, follow the main at Voices Wrestling Twitter feed. If you would like to call into the show, Joe, do you want to take any calls? Would you be willing to talk to the free listeners, the freeloaders here?
I didn't know you were technically able to do that, but if you are, I'd be more than willing to stay on for a few calls. Absolutely.
All right, Joe is willing to stay on for some calls. So for the caller who was disappointed last week, we had a caller last week, Joe, when you were on, that was calling like a couple of times while you were on with me, and I kept hitting no and no and no. Because I didn't want to interrupt the conversation. And then I finally let him in once you leave, and he was so disappointed that I didn't answer while you were on because he had no interest in talking to me. It was strictly someone who wanted to talk to Joe. So if you're out there and want to talk to Joe, the phone number is on the screen, 260-494-3811, or Skype, Let's Say Things, all one word. You can talk to us about the Daniel Bryan retirement, or whatever Japanese title Joe was talking about earlier in the show. I don't even remember. But yeah, it is a big, crazy week. I mean, we got the New Beginning shows start this week for New Japan Pro Wrestling. We have ROH announcing 14th anniversary matches today. Brief sidetrack from Daniel Bryan's retirement, because we're going to talk most of the show about that. What do you think about ROH announcing today for their 14th anniversary pay-per-view? They finally get Tomohiro Ishii in, and he's wrestling Hiroki Goto on the pay-per-view.
I could see why people are a little annoyed, because if you're going to bring these guys in, you're going to bring in Ishii, you probably want to see him against a Ring of Honor guy, do a little, cross-promotion stuff.
Right.
But let me tell you something. These two guys are going to go out there and have a hell of a match. The problem is it's a matchup people have seen, and when you're doing these sorts of joint promotion shows, you want to see something fresh. I get the frustration. I personally have no problem with the match though, because I know they're going to kill it.
They are going to kill it. We have a phone call coming in on the Skype line. Danny is on the Skype line. Danny, are you there? Danny, are you there?
Hey, Rob and Joe. How are you guys? This is Dan Hernandez.
Hi, Danny. We're doing excellent. Your thoughts on, are you calling in about the Daniel Bryan retirement, or do you want to really talk about CM Punk fighting in UFC?
Well, do you have your hat picked out? Which one you're going to eat?
I'm not eating a hat. I don't care if they've made a match between Mickey Gall. I don't see a date for that fight. I don't see CM Punk exactly excited to. Joe, chances 1 to 10 that CM Punk fights in the UFC this year.
He didn't look too thrilled.
No, it was real for him at that moment, wasn't it? When he was in the ring with Mickey Gall, it finally became real, and CM Punk looked frightened.
I think he's embarrassed by it all. I think they want him to go in there and do the pro wrestling routine to build the fight, and I feel like he's uncomfortable doing that, even though that's what you do in UFC. I mean, it's you promote the fights the exact same way, but he definitely looked uncomfortable for sure. So would it shock me if there was some sort of injury in training which held him out of his fight? No, but Rob, I think you're eventually going to eat that hat. I do think he's going to get it, only because he's the kind of guy who he's going to get in there if only to prove everybody wrong, because that's the type of personality he is.
It is. He's not going in there caring if he wins or loses, is he? He just wants to have that fight. He's the Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker, wanted to get in there so he could say he did it, and he just so happened to get fed a tomato can and he won. But CM Punk just wants to be in the ring. He's not Brock Lesnar. He's not going for a championship. So you may be right. But until that fight happens, until the bell rings, I don't have to eat any hat, kids. So just leave me alone.
But
go ahead, Danny.
But the Mickey Gall guy, I'm not sure, because the guy he fought is a guy in the media. So even though he whooped him hard, you don't know how good the guy was to begin with. So it may be UFC trying to make this Mickey Gall guy seem better than what he actually is.
Did you watch, Danny, the Daniel Bryan retirement speech from tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I was in tears. I was in tears. Daniel Bryan's my favorite wrestler.
Yeah, Daniel Bryan is he's a lot of people's favorite wrestler, I'm sure. But yeah, there were legitimate tears in that crowd, and they focused on the crowd shots quite a few times. Legitimate tears.
No, this guy is I've never spent a lot of money on wrestling, but with him I spend a lot. My first his gesture after WrestleMania 28 or 29. I was that's my first shirt I ever bought, and I really think he has a very interesting story, because when he got fired for the tie and then all that stuff, this dude has
Uh-oh. Danny has been disconnected. I don't know if he hung up or whatever, but yeah, the firing is certainly. Daniel Bryan had an interesting run in WWE, to say the least. I mean, a guy who was hired on the indie scene was seemingly destroyed week after week on NXT TV. It seemed like they didn't want him there. And then all the way to WrestleMania 30, the biggest WrestleMania of all time, in one of the most important moments anyone will ever remember from WrestleMania history. The career of Daniel Bryan, was there any other career? Let's just say you probably have a longer history than I do, as far as going back to longer in the history of WWF, WWE. Is there any other career that kind of resembles the career that we've seen of Daniel Bryan, Joe?
Huh. In terms of size, scope,
in terms of, just all the ups and downs, you could look, just the body type, how people perceived this person in WWE, being a relative mid-carder for most of their run and then getting the highest of highs as far as main eventing a WrestleMania. Not exactly you're going to find a true comparison, but I can't, seem to think of anyone who kind of resembles the career of Daniel Bryan. To me, he's a one of a kind talent, but also a one of a kind career this guy had.
Yeah, I can't come up with a comp. I do think his career there was unique. Yeah. And the interesting thing is, they wasted so much of it by refusing to do a thing with him, that they wasted such a great portion of it. They could have done so much more with this guy. and done so many more interesting things other than this guy is short and ugly and an underdog and let's they really missed the boat on this guy. Despite the fact that he eventually did get to the top, it's strange because they from the moment this guy stepped on TV on the NXT show, it was very obvious that there was a connection with the crowd.
Yeah.
That rare connection with the crowd that 99% of wrestlers just never have. He had it. And they spent so much time just denying that this guy could have been their biggest star that ultimately I think they just wasted most of the time that they had with him.
Yeah. We have a caller on the line. Caller, turn your audio down. 443 is the area code. 443. How are you? What's your name and where you're calling from?
Yeah, Quentin from Baltimore.
Hi, could you turn your audio down in the background, please? You calling from Baltimore. What's your name?
Quentin.
Quentin, question for Joe or both of us?
Yeah, is audio fine?
Yep, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, but it was a question about what he meant to WWE once everybody got behind him. Like that 2013 where he finally got to get the title shots and basically the back end of the year revolved around him. I've seen a lot of people call that probably one of the best years in WWE history, maybe the best in Raw history. Like, how much of that do you think was a feather in Daniel Bryan's cap?
Joe, you have a comment on that?
Well, I mean, it's like I said. I think they really, I'm not trying to be a wet blanket. I think they missed the boat on the guy. I really do. I think their hand was forced when they finally did get around to pushing him and building the WrestleMania around him, and they spent most of their time just putting him in situations trying to prevent him to get over. It's just such a weird company.
Yeah.
They have people who will start to get over, and they'll prevent them or do everything they can to try to prevent them from getting over, and then they'll have people like Roman Reigns who the fans just don't want to get behind, and they just continue to force their hand with them. It's amazing to me how successful this company is in spite of itself.
It is interesting because, yeah, I mean, the Daniel Bryan rise, the WrestleMania 30 main event, the biggest moment of the last 5 years at a WrestleMania, I mean, it wasn't supposed to happen. Daniel Bryan was going to wrestle Sheamus on that show. If it weren't for CM Punk leaving and Batista completely bombing on his return, Daniel Bryan doesn't get that chance. So while I'm glad that moment happened, by no means am I trying to take a crap on Daniel Bryan main eventing a WrestleMania. It turned out to, be the best WrestleMania of all time when, if everything went into place how WWE wanted, it was probably going to be a WrestleMania that kind of turned out like this year's WrestleMania is likely to turn out, where you have you have some big stars, but they're wrestling in less than ideal, appealing matches. And it turned out to be one of the best WrestleMania moments of all time, having some of the best matches of WrestleMania history. I love the way it turned out. I mean, it's amazing how they got there. But Daniel Bryan wrestling at WrestleMania 30, my key Daniel Bryan moment in WWE history. I mean, it's just, it's an interesting career. I'm not as emotional about Daniel Bryan retiring as some, because having watched him in Ring of Honor, having watched the WWE run, there wasn't much more he could have done, Joe, was there? I mean, aside from going in the Hall of Fame at some point, the best Daniel Bryan moments, even if he wrestled another 10 years, were probably behind him.
When you have a WrestleMania built around you and you beat Triple H and then you win the main event of WrestleMania and win the title, what else is left?
Right.
Right.
They gave everything to him for that night. That was the Daniel Bryan WrestleMania. And even the WrestleMania 17, Rock and Austin, one of the most famous WrestleManias of all time, maybe one of the more famous main events of all time. It wasn't built around Austin. It wasn't built around Rock. This was the Daniel Bryan WrestleMania at WrestleMania 30.
And it is weird. I mean, again, even though he got to the top, I'm still, people are going to hate me for this, but I'm still disappointed in his WWE run. I think this guy had so much more to offer than the lovable underdog. I just do. He was capable of so much more, and he showed in other places that he was able to credibly pull off other roles other than just this weird bearded troll-like underdog.
Yeah.
The JBL Flying Goats, the goofy tag team with Kane, the weird matches with Mark Henry and Big Show, where he was constantly, we were constantly reminded how small and he, how he didn't have a chance. There, he had so much more to offer than that narrow role. And I got to be honest with you, it annoys me, and it has always annoyed me. And I don't look back at his WWE run like a lot of people do, with fondness, like it was some phenomenal run. I mean, I think so much was left on the table that as a fan, I'm annoyed. I'm annoyed that they left so much on the table with this guy. It bothers me.
I'm trying to take the positive approach of having seen all the best of Daniel Bryan in WWE, because I do look at it like, we didn't have to have that WrestleMania 30 moment, and then I would be completely disappointed in his run. But at least we had the WrestleMania 30 moment. I mean, it's like looking back at Steve Austin's career, and you start to realize that, hey, that guy only had 3.5 years in WWE on top. So much more could have been done with Steve Austin. But he only had 3.5 years. CM Punk, we got a lot of CM Punk considering, the John Cena scale kind of skews that now because he's had 13 years on top, but these guys don't get a lot of time. These guys don't get a lot of time on top.
But guys like Austin and Punk got to do what they do best in WWE, and I'm not convinced that Daniel Bryan did. I look, he's a great underdog character. I get that. But I'm not convinced he got to do what he does best in the WWE. I'm not convinced of that, while those other guys did.
Can you imagine if Daniel Bryan was coming into WWE right now, and, he would be a lifer in NXT most likely, but if he were coming in right now, every single 3-month cycle, you're going to see Daniel Bryan versus Sami Zayn in a half-hour match. You're going to see him versus Shinsuke Nakamura. You're going to see him versus Austin Aries in WWE TV. It would be a tremendous run if he was coming in now, and then that's pro wrestling. Pro wrestling is all about timing.
I tell you what, I bet you he's annoyed by that too. In fact, I know he's annoyed by that. You've seen him make comments to the effect that, he was excited when Nakamura came into the company. He was excited when Hideo Itami came into the company because he wanted to work with those guys. Yeah. And now he's not, he's not going to have a chance.
He's not going to get the chance. We'll get one more call with Joe on the line here. Warren, fellow VOW team member Warren, is on the Skype line. Warren, what's up tonight?
Nothing too much, guys. I hate to say it, but I'm going to have to go with Joe on this. I think for all the emotion that a lot of people are feeling over the end of his WWE career, a lot of those people who just saw that WWE run never got to see how good he really is. I mean, when you compare, I know they're totally different styles, but when you compare his WWE matches to his ROH matches, that's just scratching the surface of what the guy can do, like he did at that WrestleMania.
We had Joe. We had someone in the chat line asking if Kurt Hennig would be a relative comparison to Daniel Bryan career-wise.
No, because he wasn't as big of a star or as over at any point. And look, that was my favorite wrestler growing up.
Yeah.
So. I have a fondness for Kurt Hennig in that Mr. Perfect character for sure, but he's no Daniel Bryan.
No Daniel Bryan. Warren, you wrote a piece at voicesofwrestling.com today looking at the irony of the timing and the giving up of the boots, if you will, of Daniel Bryan today. Go ahead and take a moment to plug that piece really quick.
Okay, the gist of it is in 2005, when he won the ROH World title, he talked about how that belt meant wrestling freedom. And, when you go back and look at what happens, him finally getting that freedom to be out of these corporate shackles, it's kind of not so sweet when you look at it. This is a guy that kind of got used in a way that really wasn't fair to his body or his talent. I think it's kind of bittersweet that he goes out the way he did.
All right. Well, it looks like so Skype's working great tonight. Joe, are you still with me?
I am here.
Okay. Thanks, Warren, for calling in. I hope these guys don't think I'm just intentionally hanging up on them, but what are you going to do?
I think Warren made all of the points he
made all the points. David Bixenspan is in the chat room saying that we're being too negative, that Bryan did what he did best in WWE. He had the same match with John Cena that he did with Kenta. It was literally laid out the same. Is that a fair statement from Mr. Bixenspan, Joe?
I don't know. You might be able to cherry pick matches. That's fine. And look, granted, I'm probably am being a little too negative. It's not that I'm being negative. I was annoyed the way his career played out. And here's the thing, Rob. Anyone who listens to our show knows that during Daniel Bryan's active run, I didn't say anything different that I'm not saying now.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like he was used in a way that was very narrow, and they could have done a lot more with him. And I'm going to be consistent. Today, I'm going to have the same consistent thoughts today that I had 2 years ago, that I had a year ago, that I had 3 years ago. I mean, you're going to get the straight opinions out of me. I'm not going to sit here and tell you something different and change my thoughts just because the guy retired tonight. I feel like I feel about his WWE career, and that's not going to change just based on the fact that he retired. I'm going to be consistent.
You are Mr. Consistency. You are the king of banter. You are a world-renowned international broadcast journalist. Joe Lanza joining us on VOW Live. It is an interesting night. I'm sure you guys will talk about this on the VOW featured podcast later in the week. Am I mistaken?
Right after we're done with Yuji Hino.
That's right. You got to watch. You got to catch that. All the Japanese talk. You'll preview New Japan beginning in Osaka too, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're going to talk Daniel Bryan. It'll probably lead off the show in all seriousness, and we'll do the new beginning stuff. Google Yuji Hino, Rob. I think you would dig him.
Okay, I will Google that. I know Rich is excited to talk about Daniel Bryan. Daniel, he was waxing poetic on Twitter earlier today at Voices Wrestling about, kind of the same boat that I was in. Daniel Bryan keeping him involved in Ring of Honor when there was not a whole lot else in Ring of Honor to keep you involved. We were here for the glory period of Ring of Honor, which is 2003 to 2006 about. And, it was a struggle to keep going with Ring of Honor when everyone was leaving. But Joe, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Later, brother.
Later. We have a call on the Skype line. It is Mr. Chat Room himself. It is David Bixenspan. Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. Funny how that timing works that I called the second Joe left.
Yeah, it's the second week in a row where someone's wanted to get on with Joe and debate him and battle.
What do you mean I wanted to? Never mind.
Oh, maybe you didn't. I don't know. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you wanted to call and talk to me. We're a budding, best friend relationship here, I figure. David, we talk on the DMs every once in a while. We've done what best friends do and spill DMs into the public. We're getting to be pretty close here, Dave.
Hopefully not too.
Do friends call you Dave? I don't know.
Some.
Okay. Bix, what's up?
Man, look, here's what I was saying. People were being too negative.
Sure.
It's just that, in a day or two, we'll talk about all this stuff, and we should. But right now, we've never seen anything like that, what we just saw tonight. Really, that was incredible.
Yeah, it was. I don't really remember too much of Edge's speech, but it was pretty similar as far as they got, basically 20 minutes to go out there and say whatever they wanted. Daniel Bryan used about 6 minutes of his time to just let it soak in, right? Just let the crowd go crazy and let it soak in. It was an amazing moment. I'm glad they gave him the main event slot on the show, and I'm glad they didn't interrupt it at all.
Yeah, I was not crazy about Michael Cole chiming in at the end of the show, and also on the weird, whatever you want to call it, post overrun on the network. Though it was nice, especially when he was, when you kind of heard him off mic with Bryan at the, when he came by. Sure. But, and this is not, it would feel stupid to compare, retirement speeches to each other, but this felt a lot more emotional than the Edge thing. Let's be honest. Just everything, just the way that, just the thing I come away with from this that a lot of people said, I tweeted something about it. I saw Gino Morosco tweet something about it on the Cage Side Seats account. He was, he's talking during the speech, spending so much of this time about what we did for him.
Yeah.
We don't deserve this guy.
Right.
He spent, after the speech, he goes out, he made a point of, only the fans of the first row, because it's not like he could reach anyone else. Mm-hmm. He went and he shook hands with, hugged, or slapped hands with, and had a moment with literally every single fan in anything that could be considered the first row around the entire ringside to the ramp to the stage.
Yeah. So, Daniel Bryan here, we had a question in the chat room I didn't get to ask Joe. I want to ask you, Dave.
Okay.
chances 1 to 10 that Daniel Bryan wrestles one more match? Because Joe's one of those who thinks that he's probably not done, that he's going to ride out whatever time he has to serve in WWE and then eventually go wrestle at an Evolve show somewhere as a last match. You know, I'm not in that boat. I think Daniel Bryan, the way he was giving his emotion tonight, you know, whatever test he took, whatever diminished capacity he found out he had, I think is a smart enough guy where he's just going to say, you know what, for Bree and for any future children, I'm not going to risk it. So I would put it at 1. I'm relatively low. I wouldn't close the door. I'm 1. Joe's kind of high on thinking it might happen somewhere. Where are you? Where you stand?
Okay, well, let's think about it this way. His contract, even if it didn't get extended by the injury, is up when? Late next year? Or the year after?
This year.
It is up this year?
It was this year. I believe it's next year now based on any freeze of time they had and whether he wants to, you know, contend that. But
well,
it was supposed to be in August.
Yeah, I was thinking that because it would be August 2010, probably a 3-year deal and another 3-year deal. But depending on how much freezing there was with the 2 injuries, I mean, he's probably not free and clear of his WWE deal
right
for, let's say, 2 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
The way they've talked, they're probably, it wouldn't shock me if Bree is either pregnant or has had a kid by then.
Oh, yeah. On that note, I think Bree is probably done at WrestleMania. This may be her last match coming up in a couple weeks.
I'd be shocked if she's not done after WrestleMania.
Yeah, I think she's done. I think we're not going to see the Bellas in the ring ever again.
Yeah, I mean, also, someone had pointed out that I think I didn't listen to it myself. There was a thing on Reddit about it that on one of the media appearances that the Bellas did for Total Divas, that I think Bree said something about that, like, now is when they're finally going to try to have kids. And Bryan had said something in the past about how when he becomes a father, that's when he's done with wrestling. So whatever, it's probably happening soon. But yeah, I agree with you. We may never see either of the may never see the Bellas together again. And Bree is, I would think, is done after WrestleMania. And one of the things I was thinking about was, like, and it kind of ties into just the whole thing about the way, you know, the fans feel about him and vice versa. It was like the only moment I could think of that was really like tonight. Do you remember the Raw after his father died?
I do remember. I do remember it. It somewhat well. I remember the emotion of Daniel Bryan. I mean, that's, you know, the emotion that's on his face, his mannerisms in the ring during that. That's what you remember.
Yeah, I mean, the thing was that they gave him, you know, because I think what most people remember is that they would kind of quickly went into the angle with Kane, whisked him away, didn't have him talk. But what that angle started with was with Bree in the ring, cheerleading the crowd in the yes chants. Mm-hmm. The crowd, I don't remember what city it was, but clearly aware of what has happened. And just like that, I mean, I guess, I mean, I don't know if you would have seen that happen with another wrestler because it is a unique set of circumstances, but you try to think of these moments like this and you don't think of anything really with anyone else, at least in modern wrestling.
I wonder if part of that too is how invested we've been in the career of Daniel Bryan from start to finish. And we may not have been that invested in Edge. So it really is a situation where this is just a guy you've been following for so long that you feel closer to his career than you do someone like if, say, Sheamus. If Sheamus had the same injury and he was, you know, forced to retire, one, do you think they're even giving him the time like Daniel Bryan? Because Sheamus didn't really mean to WWE what Daniel Bryan meant for that short run up to WrestleMania 30. And Sheamus, I don't know if he's the type of guy that would draw the reaction of the crowd. But, you know, we think of other guys that could go out there and do the same similar, you know, career retrospective that wouldn't be remembered as well as Daniel Bryan just because they weren't our guys, for example.
I think it's tough to say. My first instinct is that Christian is the answer to that question. But Sheamus has been around a lot more. Christian got hurt so much, so often, for such extended periods of time that it felt like he hadn't been around in years.
Yeah.
So by the time that they retired him, it was like, and I kind of hate to put it this way, it was like, oh, eh. So I think it you can say it's the answer, but I'm not sure if it's the answer to that. Like if it depends on how. I think it's kind of what I just said with Christian, that it kind of depends on how much of a presence the hypothetical wrestler, whether it's Sheamus or otherwise, would have had, leading up to it.
Sure. Now, the most important question, Bix, your favorite Yuji Hino memory? Exactly. I don't know who this guy. Joe Lanza kept bringing up Yuji Hino, and I don't know who it is, and maybe that's my fault. I don't know, but what are you going to do? Listen to the Voices of Wrestling podcast this week, everyone. You're going to get all your Yuji Hino talk that you could ever need. But David Bix, I mean, this is going to go down as the Daniel Bryan Raw. Did anything we had more Brock Lesnar beating up Dean Ambrose. We had Roman Reigns and Brock not touching again. At least if they touched on this Raw, I didn't notice it. None of that's going to get remembered, right? I mean, I'm glad they did a whole bunch of stuff with the main event of Fastlane as it's coming up, but it was really strange that they did so much on a Raw where no one's ever going to remember that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the shame with it is that the stuff for the Fastlane main event was actually pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing with Dean Ambrose here. Jeff and I are going to talk on Shake Them Ropes a lot this week, that it was just a weird Raw in the fact that you have Dolph Ziggler winning a match over Kevin Owens with his feet on the ropes. You have Dean Ambrose only getting a one-up on Brock when Brock is distracted and he gets a low blow. It was an interestingly booked WWE Raw.
Yes. Well, you know what, though? I mean, it was a 3.5 hour show. So
it was a 3.5 hour show. That is true. It was a long show. A 3.5 hour. I mean, the overrun went so long that I couldn't get my show on in time. I couldn't do it. Do it. But that's what happens. That's what happens. Any final thoughts, Mr. Bixenspan?
I just feel like this is probably, at least modern wrestling wise, probably the most emotional, probably most memorable segment we've ever seen and possibly ever will see. I mean, throwing out things like deaths, which, I mean, I think it's a little bit different. This was a thing with a crowd. You know what I mean? It's like, this was truly special. And I think we all have to really let that sink in.
It was a special night. I want to thank you so much, Bix, for joining us again here on VOW Live. When we get the big viewer numbers, I will be sure to credit you and not Mr. Lanza.
Well, I think this is your most watched live stream yet so far, right?
It might be, yeah. I mean, it's a big news story. It's a big news story with Daniel Bryan. This is a week where I wasn't even going to be doing this live show. And then today I decided to do it before the Daniel Bryan news even broke. And then Daniel Bryan news broke. And I'm like, well, now I'm glad I chose to do it this week. Can't be taking weeks off, Bix. You know that.
I know that very well.
You know that very well. All right, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight, and maybe we'll be back next week, and maybe if you would like to call in, I would be glad to have you.
Sounds good.
All righty. That was my best friend, David Bixenspan. For those watching on the live feed, we'll get the video back up momentarily. As my camera is prone to do, it is prone to spoiling me and leaving my side to even do anything. But we'll get myself back here in just a moment, hopefully. And while we're doing that, I'll remind you that you can call into the show. I know Isaac keeps trying to call in. I'm really sorry that, it's just been bad timing. Hopefully I'm going to get you on right now. Isaac, are you there?
Hey, Rob, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for being patient with us tonight as I attempt to work the phone lines and get you on here.
I want to talk about the history of Yuji Hino.
Do you really?
I want to. That's where all the listeners are coming from. Joe mentioned it at the top of the show, and that's where all the listeners are coming from. They heard about Yuji Hino, and they just want to get straight on.
I'm going to disagree with you there. I don't think that's where all the listeners are coming from. But in fact, I'm going to tell you. No Yuji Hino talk. Do you actually know stuff about Yuji Hino?
I have a podcast on on sleazy Japanese wrestling, Rob.
All right, tell me who Yuji Hino is.
He is a hoss who wrestles for Wrestle One, Keiji Muda's promotion, right?
He's a current wrestler.
He is a current wrestler. He's 31 years old.
Okay.
He was in Kantai Dojo for 10 years.
Okay.
Tucker's promotion, Tucker Michinoku.
Okay.
And at the end of last year, he jumped to Wrestle One, and he has recently won their mega championship, like their top championship. And he's just a big dude that hurts people, and I highly recommend his matches with Jairo, Kuroshio, and Manabu Sawyer.
Alrighty. I will.
You don't know who they are, do you, Rob?
I don't follow Wrestle One. Listen to me. Listen to me right now. All right. This goes for everybody. I watch 3 hours of WWE Raw every Monday. I do my podcast, Shake Them Ropes. I do this VOW live show now, which some people seem to enjoy, and we get some calls coming in. So many that for the first time this week, I'm experiencing the issue, and Isaac, you know this because you've been a victim of it. I'm experiencing the issue that too many people are trying to call all at the same time, and I can only take one at a time safely. I mean, I could take two, but then one person's waiting on hold, and there's a whole bunch of noise in the background. So I'm doing my best here. I'm doing my best to keep the one call at a time.
You're doing a very good job.
I appreciate that.
A good job.
The point is, I am not the wrestling guru that watches, and no offense if you are, because I love that there are people out there, and if it's your passion, great, but I cannot watch 30 hours of wrestling every week. I just can't do it. So my podcast is WWE centric. I focus on that. I watch New Japan. I watch every New Japan show that's on New Japan World. I love it, but I don't know who everyone is, and I'm sorry if that upsets you.
No, don't be sorry.
I'm so sorry.
You're the normal one.
I got JJT telling me to shut my bald head ass up over here in the chat room. I got 091 Hero, who obviously loves his Japanese pro graps, telling me to go away. I mean, I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry.
Hey, they name dropped my podcast in the comment.
A Puro in the Rough?
That's it.
Puro in the Rough is the podcast in the comments. Anything else other than Yuji Hino that you would like to mention tonight? Were you a big Daniel Bryan fan? I mean, were you calling in for the Daniel Bryan?
I cried. Yeah, I lost my mind. My tears were flowing.
Yeah.
The one thing I did want to touch on was the parallels between, like, you were talking about if there's a WWE career like Daniel Bryan.
Yeah.
Eddie Guerrero came to mind.
Okay.
His first couple years in the company weren't that great, but at the height of his popularity. Eddie
Guerrero's a good one because Eddie Guerrero had, you can compare Eddie Guerrero in WCW kind of to Daniel Bryan's rise on the indies. A lot of fans got behind Eddie in the WCW, but he was never pushed as anything. And he had the crowd following. He goes to WWE. He's a mid-carder for almost his entire run until that year where he was main eventer, winning the title off of Brock Lesnar, going on to WrestleMania, having a huge high in wrestling Kurt Angle at WrestleMania and keeping his title. Eddie Guerrero's probably a pretty similar career. That's a good call on your part, Isaac. I didn't even think of Eddie Guerrero. But yeah, that's certainly a good point.
Thanks, Rob. What time is it where you live? It's currently 3 p.m. in Australia.
3 p.m. in Australia. Well, it's a great time for you. It is just over midnight. We are technically also now in Tuesday here in the States. Usually we end the show by this time, but because of the long WWE Raw overrun, the Raw show on USA did not end until 11:30 at night, which is when we started this show.
Jesus.
So it was a long one. But Isaac, I want to thank you so much for calling in, and we hope to see you again sooner or later.
All right. Good morning, Rob.
All right. Good morning, Isaac. Thanks for everyone who's been trying to call in to the show. If I can't take your call or haven't taken your call, I apologize, but I can't have too many people on the line. So keep trying. Andrew Snyder says, "Whoa, let's take it easy on Rob. Good dude." Well, thank you. My emotional breakdown and possibly fake tears are working. JJT, this is the first time I'm going to do this. This is the first. I wonder if it'll work. But those in the chat room, guess what I'm about to do to Mr. JJT? I am going to shut his bald head ass up and block him. I've turned into that guy. What are you going to do? I think that's a sign that we're doing well, is that we get trolls in the chat room. Nathan, am I wrong?
You are not wrong. Although I do not have the chat room up currently because I just called in, so I've got to.
You wanted to clear your head. You wanted to clear your head of the chat room as you call in.
That too. But I do have a quick question for you. With the whole thing about Daniel Bryan retiring, he's a guy who they didn't want to push, and when they finally pushed him, they kind of caught lightning in a bottle, I guess you could say, because to me, there's nobody who's over or who was over on the main roster like Daniel Bryan was. Do you think we'll ever see that again?
Yes.
And do you think there's somebody on the main roster currently or in NXT that they could do that with?
Yeah.
Because to me, there's one person that they could.
And it's Sami Zayn.
Yeah. Okay, so because I had that thought initially, and I heard people say, I saw people say that on Twitter about, there's one person that they could do it with, and that was Sami Zayn, and that's kind of what I thought, and a lot of people were kind of shooting it down. But do you think that's out of the realm of possibility that they could, once they finally call up Sami Zayn, that they could do, I'm not saying right away, but do you think it's a possibility that they could kind of mirror the success that Daniel Bryan had with Sami Zayn?
Yeah, and it's hard to say. It's hard to say if they can ever match the success that Daniel Bryan had, because a lot of it is, as we've said before, a lot of it is about timing. I mean, we can all get behind Sami Zayn, but if the timing isn't right, it's just not going to work. We got lucky with Daniel Bryan. We got lucky that CM Punk decided to quit. We got lucky that Batista didn't come back and light the world on fire, and the crowd was really into Daniel Bryan. I mean, we got lucky for a lot of these things. People will talk about how Steve Austin getting to where he was an accident too. Sometimes it takes accidents to see what potential you have in certain people. Will there be something that allows Sami Zayn to kind of break in there and forces WWE to push Sami Zayn to a level that's acceptable for some fans? We don't know that yet, but will it ever happen again like Daniel Bryan, where a crowd just gets so behind somebody that WWE is forced to either give them the title or a main event push or make them prominent on WWE TV? Yes, it will happen again. Even if it's not Sami Zayn, even if it's in the future, it always happens. Someone will be that guy. But yeah, Sami Zayn right now, if we have to look at the current roster, he's the one most likely to be that guy. I don't see a crowd a swelling of support like Daniel Bryan, like Sami Zayn coming in the way of Samoa Joe, or, obviously not a Baron Corbin. Baron Corbin would be most related to a guy like Sheamus, where the vocal crowd doesn't see him as their guy, so it doesn't happen. I don't even see that for, a guy like Austin Aries. I don't see that for a guy like Finn Balor even. Finn Balor to me isn't on the level of Daniel Bryan as far as charisma and connecting with the crowd.
I would agree, because Finn Balor, while he's very good, he doesn't, I don't know what it is, and I've seen a lot of people say it on Twitter, they just have a hard time gravitating towards him.
Finn Balor's an interesting one. I think if he ever makes it huge in WWE, it's going to be as a heel first. And that's sort of what got him over and signed by WWE in the first place. I mean, what got him big time mainstream attention was being a heel in the Bullet Club. People were talking about Fergal Devitt for a long time, but it was still pretty quiet. It wasn't out there in the open. Then the Bullet Club happens, and now everyone, was talking about, you must watch this Prince Devitt. And you go look at his New Japan matches, and yes, they're very good, a lot of them, but they weren't blow-away stuff to where it was like an AJ Styles in his main event run in New Japan. AJ Styles was doing more than what Finn Balor had done, but it was just cool. It was, this guy who looks like a guy that we like, this guy who comes from an interesting background, interesting story, is doing cool things in New Japan. You don't always have to be the best in-ring wrestler of all time, because there's only a handful of those, right? You just have to do something cool.
Especially in WWE.
Yeah, especially in WWE. Yeah.
Look at what they're trying to do with Roman Reigns. I mean, he's not the greatest wrestler in WWE, but they're trying to make him seem that way by basing it off of his charisma, even though he can only do, as far as I'm concerned, he can't, Cena gets flack for doing the 5 moves of doom, and it's Roman Reigns, when he was in the Shield, had 3 moves, and now he's probably up to 4. But
But the difference there was, Roman Reigns for the longest time in the Shield was doing the cool stuff. He would come in at the end when the crowd was ready for the big cool power move, and he was doing cool stuff. And he had interesting lines in the Shield promos. Most of the time he was just at the end saying believe that or believe in the Shield. And the crowd was like, you're not going to get overexposed by that. And it was cool. But then when you have to give Roman Reigns essentially what he was doing in 30 seconds, now you have to stretch it out to 10 minutes.
Exactly.
It's not the easiest thing to do.
Exactly.
It's pretty damn hard to do. But we'll see how Roman Reigns goes because, it took The Rock a while. It took The Rock 2 years or so to kind of get it and to really get over as a big-time player. And he had it in him. We don't know if Roman Reigns has it in him. Sometimes you look at Roman Reigns and it looks like he does when he's doing.
And that's the thing. It's like, I think they're banking on, The Rock had the it factor.
Mm-hmm.
And the Usos, I think they kind of, as a tag team, they wanted them to have the it factor. And to me, they just don't have it. They're the John Cena of tag teams, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, depending on what perspective you're on or what side of the internet bubble you're on. But Roman Reigns, to me, doesn't have it. And there's one star in the Samoan dynasty, and that's The Rock. And I think Vince McMahon, just because Roman Reigns is Samoan, wants to try to take him and turn him into a huge star because of that fact. And I don't think it's going to work.
And I don't even know if it's, I don't think it's because he's Samoan. I think it's this, tall, dark, and handsome. That's what people like, right? And Roman Reigns is tall, Roman Reigns is dark, and Roman Reigns is a handsome fella. I compare Roman Reigns still. Do you know who Joe Manganiello is, the actor?
Yes, I do.
All right. True Blood, How I Met Your Mother. He's on a show coming up here. I forget which, but Joe Manganiello, to me, reminds me a lot of Roman Reigns. But the problem is Joe Manganiello looks cool. He looks like a guy who's a badass. He looks like interesting when he kind of takes over the screen sometimes, but he's also not a guy who's starring on his own show. He's a guy who takes the screen for the few minutes he's on, but he's not a guy who's going to get his own sitcom. He's not a guy who's going to get his own drama. He's not headlining movies. Roman Reigns, to me, reminds me of that guy where you look at him and you think this guy should be a big deal, but then you put him out there and you're like, okay, we slot him in a place that's best for him, and that's working the mid-card in movies and TV shows, and that's what Roman Reigns should be doing. What's best for him is working where his strengths are put out there in a positive light. And I don't know if main eventing and being the star of the show is the best thing for Roman Reigns yet, but it's still too early. Roman Reigns has only been in WWE proper for what now, 2.5 years. So
since I think 2012.
Yeah, there's still time. There's still time for Roman Reigns, but he's looking more and more like Joe Manganiello every time. And, for Dark Dream, ironic, for Dark Dream who's in the chat saying Roman is not dark, dude. Tan is what that expression means. Anyone who's not pasty white like myself is dark in the tall, dark, and handsome situation. But Nathan, I want to thank you so much for calling VOW Live tonight.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right. The phone lines are now open for anyone who would like to get in on the chat. 260-494-3811 or Let's Say Things, all one word, LETSSAYTHINGS, one word on Skype. You can go ahead and call in now. A couple of plugs before we move on, because I do want to get into some other topics. Feel free to call in on the Daniel Bryan retirement and any other topics that you may want to discuss before the end of the show. At Shake Them Ropes is my Twitter handle. At Shake Them Ropes. That's where you can find out show information, live shows, the links to these live shows. You can also go on to at Voices Wrestling on Twitter to follow Joe and Rich. Joe and Rich and their musings. Voicesofwrestling.com/Amazon. For those who don't have the Daniel Bryan autobiography, the best time now to buy it is probably right now. Daniel Bryan, extremely honest in this biography, going through his career on the way to WrestleMania 30's main event. Voicesofwrestling.com/Amazon. If you click that link, if you go through voicesofwrestling.com/Amazon, shop on Amazon just like normal. You can buy the Daniel Bryan autobiography right now. It's only $12 on Kindle. And you can read that on your iPhone, your iPad, Amazon Kindle, desktop computer, laptop, wherever you want to. It's only $12 right now on Kindle. Shop through voicesofwrestling.com/Amazon, and you support this show and the Voices of Wrestling website at the same time. At the same time right now, like, chat, hit the thumbs up button, please. Show your support for me in a non-monetary way by hitting the thumbs up button and liking this video. I want to thank all the people who have called in. I want to thank Joe Lanza. I kept him up late to start off this episode of Voices of Wrestling Live. And we got the chat room flowing right now. What do you think about the debut match for CM Punk? Yes, so we talked a little bit about with Joe. CM Punk is fighting Mickey Gall. That's the fight that's been announced. I never thought, on Twitter a year ago, I should have put a time cap on this, really. A year ago, I tweeted that if CM Punk ever fought in UFC, I would eat my hat, because I didn't think it would ever happen. CM Punk has been signed to UFC now for 2 years, by the way. 2 years. I never thought a CM Punk fight would happen. I should have put a cap on it. I should have put a cap to where, it was within the year, within even 2 years, and I would win. I would win that bet. I never thought that a fight wouldn't be announced. I'm not losing the bet by a fight being announced. He's got to actually fight. There's a lot that can happen. How many times have we seen a fight in UFC announced and then an injury happens, sometimes a week or a day before the event? CM Punk is an old man in the fighting game. He's an old man. He's not used to this. As the camp gets tougher, as he's actually training for a fight, maybe some fear sets in. Maybe an injury sets in. There's a lot that can happen. I don't think cold feet's going to happen, but an injury? Sure. An injury to Mickey Gall, even. I'm sure Mickey Gall isn't going in taking it lightly. This guy wants to beat CM Punk, because if Mickey Gall beats CM Punk, he's probably getting a main card fight on a pay-per-view next time, more money. Mickey Gall can make a career out of beating CM Punk. He's going to train heavily. He could get hurt. CM Punk is not going to fight on short notice, I don't think, but maybe he is. Maybe, I don't know. 14 months is 2 years. It spreads 2 calendar years. In fact, wasn't he announced in December? It might be 3 calendar years by now. Might be 3 calendar years by now. So thank you for that. Keith Harris in the chat room says it would kill his credibility and reputation if he didn't go through with it. Hey, I think CM Punk's going to go through with it. As Joe and I discussed, if there's no injury, he's going to go in that cage knowing that he'll die and get beat up. Not necessarily really die, obviously, but he'll get beat up. He'll get, maybe embarrassed, but I don't think he's worried about that. He'll get beat, okay? I don't think CM Punk even thinks he's going to win a fight. Maybe he does. I don't know. I think he'll go through with it if he can. I'm going for an injury at this point. That's the last thing I can hang my hat on. Literally hang my hat on, and not put it in my mouth, is the fact that he gets hurt. And I don't wish injuries on anybody, but I think it could happen. Before that, I was thinking, cold feet, maybe decide to do something else. Maybe it was publicity. Maybe it was going to be an ambassador for UFC and not actually fight. Things would happen. CM Punk's already been injured in training once. He missed a lot of November and December with an injury. It could happen. It could happen. Saying CM Punk is a fighter is just not true. David Bixenspan, no, it was December 2014. Yes, 2014. 1 year. 2015, 2 years. We're in 2016. 3 calendar years, everybody. And 14 months. 14 months, by the way, is also 2 calendar years. If you want to, 12 months is a year. I don't know if you know this. I'm not trying to throw shade on you, but yes, I like to round up in my numbers. But that was one of the, okay, so this was the list of topics I had before the Daniel Bryan news happened. CM Punk and Mickey Gall in UFC. We talked a little bit about ROH, the 14th anniversary, Moose versus Kazuchika Okada, and Hiroki Goto versus Tomohiro Ishii. 2 matches announced for the 14th anniversary show in Las Vegas. I went to NXT in Indianapolis on Saturday. Brought the girlfriend, by the way. Sadly, she does not want to come on the podcast and give her review of that show. Maybe one day I will butter her up to where she can do that. Finn Balor is hurt. He was walking around on crutches through Indianapolis, so he... luckily, the next TV taping is March 3rd, I think, in Columbus, Ohio. Taping some for TV. That's still a month away. The guy has plenty of time to recover. They don't even have to film anything in Columbus with him. So really, he has 2 months to recover. This guy's not going to miss any real TV time. So Finn Balor, the injury came at a pretty good time. Travis has a question for Bix, who called in. So Bix, if you're in the chat room, you said 2 years, not I said 2 calendar years. Thank you, Bix. Was that the longest Raw overrun? I seem to remember Raw overruns going longer than the 25 minutes this one went, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that was the longest Raw ever as far as an overrun. Evolve 59, Gabe Sapolsky on Twitter during Raw announced Will Ospreay versus Ricochet happening at Evolve 59 in Dallas. Obviously, New Beginning in Osaka comes this week, February 11th. The VOW podcast that comes out Wednesday or Thursday, Joe and Rich will break that show down in depth. So if you want your New Beginning in Osaka card preview, follow the website, voicesofwrestling.com, and Rich and Joe's podcast coming up later. Shake Them Ropes will be coming to you Wednesday this week. Jeff and I will be discussing all of Raw, the best of Raw, Daniel Bryan in depth, and probably my NXT trip. We'll be talking about that on Shake Them Ropes. On Shake Them Ropes this week on Friday, you can go follow me at Shake Them Ropes or voicesofwrestling.com/STR. Daniel Bryan, there was a new Daniel Bryan shirt, by the way. If you're a Daniel Bryan fan, you can go buy the Thank You Daniel t-shirt from WWE Shop. Voicesofwrestling.com/WWE Shop will get you there to where you can buy that all-new shirt. WWE was ready for this retirement. They sure were ready for this retirement. Last call for phone calls, 260-494-3811, or on Skype. The Skype name is Let's Say Things. Let's Say Things, all one word. Keith Harris says that Finn Balor should be fine for NXT TakeOver Dallas. Yeah, I have no doubt. I have no doubt that after 2 months, he will be ready for NXT TakeOver Dallas, so that's good. He's a very important part of that show. The full card, not to get into spoilers here, but the full card is pretty much completed for NXT TakeOver Dallas. WWE's website gave you one of the main events, Shinsuke Nakamura versus Sami Zayn. So, I mean, there's some stuff to look forward to at TakeOver Dallas for those who are either going. I mean, the resale value, the secondary marketplace is exploding for NXT TakeOver Dallas. I mean, the get-in price right now is, I think, something like $290 on tickets that were about $55 originally. So if you don't have a ticket right now but want to get in to Nakamura versus Zayn at NXT TakeOver Dallas, you're going to open up at about $290 per ticket right now to get in. It's crazy. And one of the stories that I had, excuse me, I don't have any beverage with me right now. I'm not drunk, by the way. One of the stories that happened this week that I wanted to touch briefly on, just in case you missed it. Axel Rotten, former ECW tag team competitor. He was in WWE for a brief run when the re-evolution, the re-beginning, the restart of ECW happened on Sci-Fi. I don't know if he was ever on the Sci-Fi episodes, but he was there for a little bit of time in WWE when they kind of kickstarted the whole WWE ECW thing. Axel Rotten died this week at 44 years old. He was living in Baltimore, died in Baltimore, unknown causes right now. But Axel Rotten died at 44. I would like to thank those that are telling me I look bald. I'm balding. Shocker. Big surprise. People do that. I'm really old. I'm like 56 years old. I'm amazed that I haven't gone bald sooner. But yeah, very sad story. Axel Rotten dying this week in Baltimore at 44 years old. There was a lot of surprise about how young he was just because he was around for so long. I've met Axel Rotten when he was coming in for Ian Rotten's IWA Mid-South. I was refereeing there, and Axel Rotten showed up at a couple of shows. He worked the Candido Cup. He worked a show in Plainfield, Indiana, where he came in. The angle was, Axel Rotten was late to the building. Ian Rotten had no friends, and Axel Rotten shows up with his gear bag at the end of the show to help Ian Rotten fight off like Tank and Insane Wayne or Insane Lane. I forget the exact angle, but I worked a few shows with Axel Rotten. He was a cool guy. When I first started refereeing, everyone intimidated me. I remember going up to Corporal Robinson, who was a hardcore deathmatch wrestler in IWA, and being so afraid to shake his hand that I didn't. I just flat out didn't. Yeah, and then, I meet Axel Rotten, and I know the history of Axel Rotten, and I'm afraid to go up and say hi, let alone referee a match of his. But the guy was so into tag team wrestling. You could tell that tag team wrestling was Axl Rotten's passion. Not because he couldn't go out there and work a singles match, just he loved tag team. He loved tag team wrestling. And he would even, talk to me about tag team wrestling, make sure the referee is in the right spot, looking at things he was supposed to look at, making sure to miss things he was supposed to miss. Axl Rotten was a nice guy to me. It'll be a shame that he's no longer going to be wrestling out there, no longer living on this earth. Axl Rotten died at 44. So there was some big news. Big news this week. Sad news. Daniel Bryan leaving WWE. There was no hint that he's going to be sticking around WWE in any role either. I mean, Daniel Bryan could be off of TV, aside from the occasional appearance, forever. He won't be an announcer on TV. He won't be a character. He won't be a general manager of SmackDown. There was no hint at anything. Will something like that happen at some point? Sure. But there was no hint of that. I could see Daniel Bryan going home, tending to his garden, being a stay-at-home father. Trent asks in the chat room, what, you didn't shake someone's hand in the wrestling business, Rob? You know what would happen to you if that was in WWE? If I went backstage at WWE, and I've been backstage once at WWE as an extra, if I went backstage in WWE, I would shake everyone's hand. Now, I didn't in WWE as an extra, because as an extra, you kind of just stay out of the way. You just wait until you need to be used, if you need to be used. You're not in the locker room. But if I was there in the locker room, I would shake everyone's hand. But at the time, it was my first IWA show. I had never met Corporal Robinson before. I was intimidated, so I didn't shake his hand. But yeah, I would get made fun of by Booker T, I am sure. It seems the opinion out there is that Daniel Bryan may work the indies at some point. People are still holding on to that hope. My question to you is why? Would it be cool? Sure. But if he's quitting WWE because Tess told him that his brain isn't working well, you want him to go further that damage and work on the indies just so you can have a cool 15-minute match with, I don't even know, Johnny Gargano? I've seen all I need to see of Daniel Bryan. I can remember the best of Daniel Bryan. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with how Daniel Bryan's career is ending. And I think what's best for everybody, not to tell you what to do, but I think what's best for everyone is to remember the positives of Daniel Bryan, accept it, and do just that. Remember them. Don't play the what if game. And this is just advice to better connect you with the retirement of Daniel Bryan. If you're upset about it, if you're disappointed that, what could have been, don't play the what if game. Don't play what if he comes back. Remember the best of Daniel Bryan. If you didn't watch Ring of Honor in the 2000s, go back and watch Ring of Honor in the 2000s. I know Ring of Honor doesn't want to make it easy for you because there's no streaming service. But go try. We'll be back with Jeff Hawkins on Shake Them Ropes this week at Voices Wrestling for the Voices of Wrestling podcast. I want to thank everyone in the chat room who listened and watched. I want to thank everyone who watches later on demand. Follow me at Shake Them Ropes and go check us out on the voicesofwrestling.com/Amazon link for all of your Amazon shopping. Please, before I go, subscribe to the channel if you're not a subscriber already. Like the video, hit the thumbs up, and we will see you most likely next week on VOW Live.